Do we want to start by each saying our names for the record?
Sure.
Um, my name is Nicole Schaarschmidt.
I'm Ethan Tonomura.
And I'm Mattie Peracca.
We're going to be going over our action plans. So, for my needs assessment action plan, I decided to look at the LGBTQIA plus student population. I'm a school counseling intern at Livermore High School. So when looking at the general demographic data for Livermore High, you can see that the majority population includes white and Hispanic students, as well as Asian, African American, Pacific Islander, and Native American populations as well, with a total of around 1,800 students. So when looking at the LGBTQ students, one of the challenges with looking at information and data on how these students are doing academic, socio-emotional, or college and career readiness is that a lot of data is not deaggregated to look at gender identity or sexual orientation. But if you look at the California Healthy Kids Survey, which can report on district-wide data, looking at our two main high schools, we can deaggregate that data to look at more specific outcomes. So these surveys in 2023 to 2024 saw that non-straight, so gay, lesbian, or bisexual youth reported higher rates than their straight or heterosexual peers of having trouble focusing on schoolwork, higher rates of considering suicide, chronic sadness or hopelessness, and having emotional distress. They also had an increased fear of being beat up or experiencing harassment at school. They also experienced lower rates than their heterosexual or straight peers of optimism, life satisfaction, school connectedness, and school perceived safety. So for my needs assessment for Livermore High, I wanted to look at what our students were saying and what our population at the school, what they were experiencing. So I was able to gather 11 responses. There is a challenge with getting responses from this population to protect privacy. So they were surveyed at the GSA Pride Club and also through kind of grassroots word of mouth to protect their privacy. So when you're looking at overall school climate, we see that over here, near half of the students report that they've experienced bullying or harassment regarding their identity at school. And then you see a high percentage, 81.8% of students somewhat feel safe expressing their identity. So we'd really like to see that number higher if possible of the yes. When looking at the type of harassment students have experienced, primarily they experienced verbal at 63.3% and microaggressions. You also see there is some physical harassment and social media harassment that can occur as well. 27.3% of students said bullying and harassment has prevented them from engaging on activities on campus, which is a concern. We want all of our students to have access to opportunities and activities. 18.2% said there is not a supportive adult in their life who they feel they can talk to about their experiences, identity, or challenges, and that includes staff and teachers on campus. Then when looking at our population of students' mental health, you can see that when looking at their overall mental health, we see that there's kind of averaging in the middle here, around 6 to 7 out of 10, with some outliers here. So knowing that there can be improvements in supporting these students there. 27.3% of students said they have not received counseling support before, so that is a potential need. And then about half of students said that they somewhat feel confident advocating for themselves regarding things at school. And then this is a big point here I just want to highlight, which is majority of students agreed that recent political changes had a negative impact on their mental health and well-being. So especially right now, there's a really, really high need for students getting support to create resiliency and support during this time. Two other just main things to highlight is that anxiety was reported the highest with these changes. going on our political climate and our world right now. And then majority of students reported a score of 3 out of 5 for managing stress or other emotional challenges. So we could support in their anxiety and stress management as well. I just want to briefly touch that these are some quotes directly from students. These speak to barriers they might have to feeling safe on campus, and we can follow up after this if you want to see more specifics, and we can kind of talk about what they're saying. But for the sake of time, I'll be moving on to kind of what this means, right, and what our action plan, what we'd like to do to support these students. So I wanted to talk to them directly about what they would like, what would be most helpful. So these students did report that they would love to see support groups and LGBTQIA peer mentor programs to discuss shared experiences and access support. And then when asked about what topics they would find most helpful to talk about, the 2 primary ones are understanding gender, sexuality, and identity, and mental health and coping strategies. So that's kind of what guided how to address this gap. When looking at why is there a gap, through the data we can see that access to safe spaces on campus or specific support groups, access to LGBTQIA specific resources, access to safe adults on campus. Many students do not feel comfortable expressing their identity or had concerns about their privacy. And then there's also community culture and beliefs or a lack of understanding about either their identity, concerns, or experiences. So being able to kind of meet these needs with their action plan is our goal. So 2 primary things we want to do is 1, create a LGBTQI peer support group. They'll meet for 20 minutes per week. Semi-structured discussions focused on identity, mental health and resilience, support systems, and coping strategies. It'll be about 6 to 8 sessions weekly on Fridays during the last period of the day. This will help mitigate the impact on class time because not all students have a 7th or 8th period. And also kind of increase. A lot of students did mention they didn't want to give up their lunches for a group. So we saw that being a barrier at the time. Location would be the Wellness Center. And the ultimate outcome we're looking for is to provide a safe and affirming space for students to discuss challenges, build resilience, identify coping strategies and supports, and foster a sense of community and safety. Then the next item we want to do is a guidance lesson, hitting on another point they brought up, which was wanting to learn more about gender, sexual orientation, and identity. This will be offered to grades 9 through 12. It'll be 1 lesson held during their CAP, so their Cowboy Advisory period at the Wellness Center. There'll be 2 weeks to advertise the guidance lesson, and we're looking to present after spring break, April 8th. The outcome would be to define gender identity and sexual orientation, as well as give them a place to explore how identity develops, what their identity is, and allow them to kind of identify support systems and create personal empowerment, allow them to also advocate for themselves too. And these are the different ASCA behavior and mindset standards that are touched on, including a mindset standard of acceptance, respect, support, and inclusion for self and others, and as well as these other behavioral ones, including overcoming barriers, coping skills, managing transitions or changes, and building positive relationships and advocacy. Some benefits and challenges. So benefits would be creating an inclusive and safe space on campus for shared experiences and support, guidance on mental health, increasing coping strategies and supporting resilience, education on identity, destigmatizing gender and sexuality, affirming sense of self, and creating a space for students' voices to be heard. That's a huge one we heard when kind of having conversations with students. Is a big part is just feeling heard and having a space to express some of their concerns. Some challenges, some that we've already kind of seen and discussed with students is recruiting for a group when there's privacy concerns in this community, especially in this community. And always, we do want to consider confidentiality in a group setting and how that could really impact their concerns with privacy. And then, speaking with my supervisor and the school, there is, and even district-wide, right, there's an implementation gap we see throughout California on how there are a lot of supports, but there are challenges to implementing them in schools. And much of this seems to be caused by LGBTQ community beliefs and some pushback that we have seen. And in summary, the importance of this would be acknowledging that LGBTQ students are at higher risk for suicide, bullying, and harassment, and decreased mental health access. So we want to make sure we're meeting that need of this population. So in closing with the action plans and interventions I've introduced, the expected outcomes for students in this population would be an increase, 95% of these students will report increased sense of safety, inclusion, and personal well-being. 95% of these students will report having a better understanding of gender and sexual orientation. And we would like to see 100% of the students report an increase in their self-compassion and acceptance. Students in this population, we hope they will experience a safe and supportive space on campus, gain a deeper understanding of their personal identity and values, build coping strategies, and identify support systems on and off campus to foster resilience, self-acceptance, and empowerment. So those are the key things we want to focus on. And thank you all for your time today. And I'd like to open up if there's any kind of final questions. Great. All right, I'll pass it off to Ethan.
Pull up. Okay. Okay. Um, Hello, my name is Ethan. I'm with Kathleen McDonald High School, and I'll be presenting on supporting EL1 students. Um, So doing a quick kind of overview of some of the data for the school, something to keep in mind with Kathleen McDonald High School is that this is a newly built school. So this data being pulled from last school year, 2023 to 2024. We did not have all for sophomore, juniors, and seniors. So some of this data is a little small, but looking at the kind of the ethnic demographic breakdown, it's a majority of Latino or Hispanic students. In addition to that, of at least the 434 students that were enrolled last year, 55 of them, or about 12%, were considered EL learners. So there's definitely a good portion of students who are still learning English and a lot who are Hispanic and or Latino. Um, so kind of going into how we collected this information on these EL students. We collected data both formally and informally. We put out a Google form to the EL1 students who are all in one class, to about 15 of them. We surveyed them about social emotional needs and academic needs. In addition to that, we also pulled data from the California Healthy Kids Survey from the Santa Clara district. So that's some more district-wide data from 2023, 2024. In addition to this, we also pulled some informal data talking to the EL teacher, our wellness coordinator, other school counselors, and other staff that interacted with the EL students to see what other needs were there. And we got about 10 responses from the EL1/beginner students. And then kind of highlighting, summarizing the various data we pulled, looking at the social emotional needs, looking at from the district level, pretty much across the board when asked about if they've experienced harassment or bullying, or if they heard rumors about them, being afraid of being beaten up or being in a physical fight, the English learners significantly Um, yeah, have felt like they experienced this type of fear, anxiety, and safety concerns pretty much across the board there. In addition to that, specifically talking to the EL1 learners at this high school, that there was about 64% of these students, they were concerned specifically about ICE. About 40% were concerned about just general immigration concerns and having either them or commonly their parents being deported. And again, about 40% having at least some concerns about what's going on politically in the news and the media. And looking over at the academic needs we identified, about 40% of these students did not know the graduation requirements for high school. And only 30% of these students showed any interest in college as a post-secondary option. So looking at that, there's definitely a gap with these EL1 students, specifically on the social emotional level, concerns about safety, both at school and at home. But also there's an academic gap in terms of a lot of these students not knowing these graduation requirements and yeah, not being that interested in college. Um, so with that, kind of asking ourselves, what are the reasons for these gaps based on the current circumstances? The number one kind of reason that there could be these deficits is the language barrier itself. The fact that these students are very much still learning English, and the majority of classroom instruction and lessons, both social emotional wise and about classes, are primarily given in English. So there's a lot of information that just might not be connecting with them. Something else that was brought to our attention was just kind of the culture amongst the EL learners. They stick pretty close together. Some of them have stated it's nice to be with people who kind of understand their culture, their background, have come into the country pretty recently. But within that, there's this element of a lot of these students kind of only know about just going right into the workforce. So there's an element of the culture being perpetuated amongst them is not very pro-college. In addition to that, all students just not using or knowing about on-campus resources that are present for them. So then the question, what is the action plan I am proposing? I'll be proposing an EL support group. The basic plan would be we'd be meeting with EL1 students about 6 times over the course of about 3 months, so about twice a month, during either PCBL time or advisory time, or during the EL class time, kind of depending on what time would allow. Um, and then the prospective outcome would be that these students would have more knowledge in terms of graduation, their academics and their GPAs and school involvement would improve, mixed with also um, improvedness in their overall well-being and wellness. The proposed time to run these groups would be around from March to May, kind of more towards the end of the school year, giving some of these students more time to adjust. Mixed with this will occur after the LPAC testing, which is the most stressful time for many of these EL students. Kind of a peek into some of the guidance lessons we would be running. One of a more wellness-centered lesson, helping to build one of the ASCA mindsets of having positive, respectful, and supportive relationships with students similar and different to them. We'd be running a support group kind of talking about ways to identify good friends or communities um, at school, and it would encourage and help these students to kind of branch out from just their fellow EL learners. In addition to this, a more academic focused lesson, building short and long-term academic career and social emotional goals. We would be doing a more focus group and teaching the specific graduation requirements for the Santa Clara School District um, in Spanish and or with a translator, helping students kind of move this vague idea of graduation to more concrete, I need these classes, these units by the time I graduate, helping to give them, yeah, more direction and kind of motivation, again, in a more concrete fashion for them. And talking about possible challenges and barriers, one of the first ones is student buy-in. not every student would be excited by having to learn more about graduation. But ways that we can kind of overcome this would be and helping them connect, graduation to future success outside of school, mixed with us using specifically elements of class time means it'd be harder for the kids to not show up, since that's another concern of if it's an after school program, students might not show up. In addition to that, concerns around student culture and resistant to change is not uncommon for high school, and students don't really like changing what they're doing. But one of the other strategies other schools in the district have used is bringing in other bilingual student leaders who can act as kind of student ambassadors to help bridge the gap there. In addition to that, another challenge is that we would be utilizing advisory or EL class time. And there would be a lot of students who would not want to lose that advisory time or that class time. But promoting it as we'd only be coming in about twice a month, only for a couple months, that you wouldn't fall too far behind in losing some of that class time. And the benefits, I mean, overall, the hope would be these students would increase in their comfortability at school, feeling more connected, a little safer, and there'd be increasing grades. Again, having graduation more in their minds and a little more concrete would promote increase in class involvement. In addition to that, getting them more connected to on-campus activities would boost student involvement on campus. And with them being more connected, there would be a hopeful decrease in overall behavior referrals, whether they are connected to more clubs or sports. That'd be the hope. In addition to that, overall increased student graduation for EL students. Again, McDonald High School is new, and we don't actually have any graduation data as of yet, but we know from other districts there are definitely concerns with EL students kind of falling behind on the graduation kind of pacing. But yeah, again, overall, wanting just to highlight that there's definitely identified need for these kind of Spanish and EL learning students, especially with the current political climate, and helping to kind of promote, yeah, the importance of education, and overall that is, that does help with success after high school. And that one of our ultimate goals is just for students to be able to see school as a safe place where they feel supported and connected to, their peers, like-minded or otherwise, but also to other adults on campus as well. Um, and with that, that's the end of my presentation. And thank you so much for your time.
All right, let me share my screen. All right. Hi, everyone. My name is Mattie Peracca, and I'll be presenting on Black and African American student involvement in dual enrollment at Castro Valley High School. So to start off with a few demographics, since I am targeting Black African American students at Castro Valley, as you can see, they're about 4.8% of our total student population, so about 137. This was the data from the California dashboard a few years ago, but I checked with my supervisor and she actually said we're up to about 210 students, so the population has grown over the past couple of years. And here are some of the recent demographics of dual enrollment from the past 3 semesters. So as you can see, the dark blue representing our Asian AAPI students and that light teal color representing our white European students do represent the majority of dual enrollment that we offer. Black African American involvement tends to hover around 5%. Last semester in the fall 2024, our district made an effort to increase enrollment by offering a dual enrollment course specifically catering to Black students. And the way this was done was by not only having a person of color teach the class, but it was the head of the Umoja community, which is a diversity community that incorporates a lot of history, enrichment, and involvement in the African American culture. So by doing that, our percentages rose to 23.5% in the fall. And so I was able to work with Chabot this spring to ensure that that same course can be taught again in fall 2025. Just because, again, in the springtime, that course was no longer offered and our percentages did drop again to below 10%. And so we're seeing that that class does make an impact. And so really trying to make sure that we can continue to increase those statistics. I also worked with Chabot College to make sure that more hybrid and asynchronous dual enrollment options were offered, considering that many of our students had expressed an issue with being in in-person classes after school due to family obligations, work commitments, etc. So in my needs assessment, which was answered by 17 African-American students, one of the questions that I asked was, what would be helpful in assisting you in completing the dual enrollment steps? And as you can see, majority did say that one-on-one support or small group or group workshops would be helpful. And then kind of extrapolating that down, I asked if you had taken dual enrollment, what difficulties have you encountered? So students said no help, primarily, time frustration, which kind of plays into like those after school obligations I was mentioning. And yeah, overwhelm, confusion with the process, etc. And then the other the other 10 students had not taken a dual enrollment class before. And so I asked, what has prevented you from doing so? And again, students were able to check all boxes that applied. And this was kind of a variation of answers, primarily busy schedule, complicated steps, and again, just unsure of their ability to succeed in a college level class, which really rang some bells for me, as well as unsure of which course to take. So kind of showing that lack of support and advisement. So my identified equity gap is Black African-American students in dual enrollment, which I believe mainly is an access gap in terms of students not having that support. I think things that that uphold the gap, a lot of their parents didn't go to college or didn't have that experience with enrolling in a college level class. And so a lot of times there's not that parent support piece that their Asian or white counterparts have built in. And like I was saying earlier, the after school obligations and information overload, and not enough exposure in middle school to what dual enrollment is, how to sign up, and what the benefits are. Ways to help close the gap would be to really engage parents specifically and educate them on the process and the benefits so that they can help support their students once they've identified that interest in taking a college level class. And then also providing small group workshops to students to not only clarify the steps, but it'll also show them that like they are capable and can do this. And I think that's a lot of sometimes what's missing, give them that extra nudge to signing up. So my primary SMART goal is to increase the percentage of Black African-American students in dual enrollment classes to 35% in fall 2025. It would be the highest percentage that we've had enroll. The district, in collaboration with Chabot, helped address the gap in fall, but again, we had those percentages rise and then didn't really continue with that trend in spring. And so again, people get busy, you know, things get on people's plates. And so again, I really feel like as a counselor, it's my job to kind of level that playing field and help continue to increase those populations to help continue to close that gap. So my plan to help CVHS reach the goal, one of my action plan items was to host a 6-week workshop series that caters to our group and envelops them in kind of this care and concern for them, but also teaching them how to be successful and helping show them that they are capable and that they can understand the enrollment steps, they can sign up on their own, and they can be successful. And I think it would be really important to incorporate other students of color who have successfully completed dual enrollment courses and kind of create a buddy system for these students so that they can feel confident about pursuing this. This action plan item kind of lines up with ASCA Standard A, academic development, and also ASCA Standard C, which is career development. So again, not only thinking about ways that they can reduce their overwhelm, but also how can they be even more academically successful and more prepared for future careers. So my second action plan, we do have the 6-week workshop that I had planned, but also hosting a parent engagement night, I think is so important, where a family can learn about the benefits, the steps, and how they can support their child from home. We as counselors can support as well. But as we know in the school setting, a lot of times there's never enough counselors in the school setting to be able to help each and every student. And sometimes that support starts at home. And so I thought about doing a parent engagement night, at least one evening per month for about an hour. And I thought virtual would be best to, again, accommodate a busy working parent schedule, as well as student schedules. The 6-week workshop series would also be virtual, just given that, again, students have obligations. They almost always have to be somewhere. A lot of them have jobs. A lot of them are playing sports, have clubs, other activities. And so making time to do anything in person outside of school classes can be very difficult. So I really want to utilize the virtual platform in that regard. And just a summary overall, so my SMART goal, yes, again, to increase Black African student population in dual enrollment to 35% by fall 2025. And I think some of the benefits and outcomes of these action items that I've put together is that students receive more one-on-one family support. Not just in dual enrollment, but in everything, to feel less overwhelmed, to feel like they have their parent support, they can ask them questions, and they have, again, that kind of wraparound service of not just the counselor support and teacher staff support, but also having their family on board with it. Another benefit is students would feel more confident in their ability to succeed, which, again, I think is very, very important, and I think holds a lot of our students back. They see their Asian and their white counterpart peers taking part in this, and maybe don't always believe that they have the ability for that. And so, again, I think very important, because also these students are marginalized. They're a marginalized population, and they don't have that built-in access that their peers have. And so I truly believe that as a counselor, it is my job to help level the playing field, so that these students have the opportunity to grow and to be successful in their future, whether they end up going to college or getting into a career, just to be able to have that introduction at the dual enrollment level. And that is my presentation. Do you guys have any questions?
I think it sounds great.
Awesome.
Nice
Great.
job, you guys.
Thanks, guys. All right.
All right. Yeah.